Yes, she's a singer. So I'll just leave the suspense at that and let you get rocking from there. Brad Snyder, thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys.
Shake, shake,
Oh,
shake,
thanks.
shake, 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 shake.
So yeah, on that subject, like what we were doing with Ian this morning, I'm blind, and I'll get into why that is in a little bit. But as I speak, sometimes, because of lack of visual input, I end up rotating around. So if I'm facing the wrong way, please let me know at any point in my presentation. So my name is Brad Snyder. When you're young, you don't really understand what the meaning of honor, courage, commitment, or any of those sorts of things are. But I remember kind of getting onto the path that I'm on now very, very early on when I was about 2 years old. I used to hang out with my grandpa a lot at that point, and my grandpa was building a neighborhood in Brooksville, Florida, which at the time didn't have much there. After a long career, he had amassed a decent amount of money, and he was building a small neighborhood for him and his wife, my grandma, to retire in. So I'm like 2 or 3 years old, and I'm hanging out with my grandpa as he's going to different places like Home Depot and the lumber yard to build up supplies, to lay all the foundation and plumbing and all electrical for a bunch of lots of land in the Brooksville area. And while I didn't understand what those sorts of virtues meant at that age, I was able to perceive what respect meant. Everywhere we used to go with my grandpa, we'd walk into the place, the lumberyard or Home Depot or wherever it was, and everybody knew who my grandpa was, and they knew him by first name. And they were excited to see him and sit down and talk with him about whatever was going on in the world, what was going on in his world, what was going on with this, that, the other thing, current events or whatever. So, my grandpa would go to a place to purchase a garage door opener, which would turn into a 3-hour ordeal of sitting down to drink coffee, to talk about this and that, the other thing. And the details of that isn't super important, but other than the fact that I could very distinctly perceive people's reactions to my grandpa, and it all had to do with respect. So when I was 2 or 3 years old, I remember making this kind of, or I didn't really make this affirmation to myself, but I understand now in context that this was where my path was set forward. I wanted to become a person like my grandpa. I thought, if at the age of 65, I am doing whatever he's doing, and if I command that level of respect, then I have lived a worthwhile life. From the ages of 2 to 11, I came to understand why that was. My grandpa was a World War II veteran who served in the Pacific. He was a torpedo man who threw torpedoes out the back of aircraft at Japanese submarines. He survived many, many, many incredible battles, including the Battle of Midway and such, and eventually came back to the east coast of the U.S. to train new recruits on how to drop torpedoes out at Japanese submarines. There was a really bad plane crash just off the coast of New York. The only 2 people to survive were my grandpa and the pilot. The pilot lost both of his legs, and my grandpa was really, really badly injured. My grandpa spent 4 years in the hospital recovering from his wounds, and at the end of all of that, he fell in love with his nurse, married her as my grandma, and from there on, it was like one of those greatest generation stories. He came back from the war, or recovered from his wounds, and transitioned in his career, became a professor of chemistry at one point, and then so on and so forth. But as I grew, I started to understand, that level of respect isn't commanded immediately. It's something that you earn over a lifetime. And I remember resolving that that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to live a life that was worthy of that level of respect at the age of 65. So I set on a path to kind of to go in that direction, and the very first time that I started to understand the origin of those virtues was in the swimming pool, in athletics. And I remember going to try out for the swim team the very first time, and when I showed up, I was by far the worst kid in the water. And that was a stark comparison to who I thought I was walking into that pool deck, because I grew up in Florida. I grew up on the beach. I grew up in and out of the water. I fancied myself a pretty good swimmer before I tried to do competitive swimming at the age of 11. I walked into the pool deck with a kind of arrogant mindset that I was going to go in and show everyone what was up. And when the coach threw me in the water and asked me to swim freestyle, butterfly, backstroke, and breaststroke, I didn't know any of those things. I just kind of did my own thing. And I rapidly found out that I was the worst one in the water. But within a few weeks, I was able to learn different skills. I was able to get better and better, and pretty soon I wasn't the worst one in the water. And through working with my coach and my dad, I came to understand this kind of loop. Hard work pays off. If you put in the time, you put in the dedication, you really focus on what you're doing, eventually hard work will pay off. And then along the way, you start to learn other things like being dedicated to your craft, showing up on time, all these different kind of little desktop calendar BS that we flip over. You start to see in practical application how those things all come to fruition and kind of shape you into the athlete that you want to be. I think at the age of 11, every one of us wants to be an Olympian. So we start watching the Olympics in 92 and 96 and admiring our heroes of Tom Dolan and Janet Evans and all that sort of stuff. And we start shaping ourselves in those images, and along the way we start to understand that the reason that someone attains that level of excellence in performance is because of how dedicated they were, how committed they were to their goals, to have the courage to put themselves out there and take the risk to accomplish something great. But at some point or another, I recognize that at 5'9", at that age, I was probably like 95 pounds. I just don't have what I perceive to be the body of an Olympian. But I do have the opportunity to use swimming as a way to get into college and swim. So I used that as a platform to go to a service academy. I went to the Naval Academy. I graduated in 2006, and while I was there, I kind of decided to pursue a career in explosive ordnance disposal, which is a fancy way of saying I was a part of the bomb squad for the Navy. I spent about a year learning how to take apart every kind of bomb that you can imagine, from a grenade to a rocket, to a landmine, to nuclear missiles, to all of that sort of stuff. And then once I learned that craft, I went to Charleston, South Carolina, spent another 11 months kind of working on figuring out how to do that as far as IEDs were concerned in Iraq. I deployed to Iraq in the fall of 2008 to the spring of 2009, preparing, like while I was doing all that training, the surge was going on in Iraq, and I was preparing for what I thought was going to be days where we would be diffusing 100 IEDs or so per day for a 6-month period of time. It turned out in the fall of 2008, the spring of 2009, we signed a new status of forces agreement in the country of Iraq that began the withdrawal, and I ended up spending a lot of time training my Iraqi counterparts, Iraqi bomb disposal units, whether they were army or police. And I rapidly learned that training in the Middle East really just means drinking a lot of chai tea. But in any case, I spent about 6 months drinking chai tea in Iraq, and I ended up coming back just fine. I moved up to Virginia Beach for what was going to be my second tour, something I was really excited about. I was going to deploy as the subject matter expert and platoon commander of 8 other explosive techs like myself with SEAL Team 10 for their impending deployment to Afghanistan. Spent about 2 years doing all the cool Navy SEAL stuff, jumping out of airplanes, shooting a lot of stuff, blowing a lot of stuff up, and it was really fun. So then I deployed to Afghanistan in the spring of 2011 with a new mission. So our mission in Afghanistan was going to be to train, equip, and escort on operations these Afghan commandos. They're effectively Afghan special forces guys. And our goal was to get them to the point where they can conduct assault operations in the area of Kandahar in the end goal of protecting a democratically elected Afghanistan was the grand scheme. In execution, we spent a lot of time working with them on their tactics and then actually going out on missions where we would say, we think there are a lot of bad guys in this area. We're going to go raid this village. While we're in that process, we're going to kind of gain all the intelligence that we possibly can about future Taliban operations with the overall effect of just mitigating their influence on a particular region. The way our assault missions worked was we would get 2 giant Chinook helicopters. We would load about 30 dudes across the 2 different helicopters, 15 and 15 or so, about half American, half Afghan per the entire assault force. We would then go into a village. We would spend all day in that village. The sun would go down. We would sneak out in the middle of the night, and then the 2 Chinooks would pick us up and take us back. We did that about 27 to 30 times in between the spring of 2011 and then the fall of 2011. During that time, the threat of IEDs being buried in the ground was so high that I, along with my chain of command, made the election that it was necessary for an explosive specialist like myself to clear everywhere we went with a metal detector because there didn't seem to be a pattern of how these explosives were emplaced. So for all 27 to 30 of those combat operations, it was either myself or my partner, a guy named Adam, would walk out in front of the patrol with a metal detector in front of us, making sure that the ground was free of improvised explosive devices. On the morning of September 7, 2011, we were on one such assault operation where 2 Chinooks dropped us off in the middle of the desert, and we transversed by foot patrol into a village that we thought to be a known place where Taliban were operating. We safely made it into the village only to find that there was nobody there. No good guys, no bad guys, no women, no children, no inhabitants whatsoever, which was a really eerie feeling. And you start to question in your mind, why is there nobody here? What's the deal with this place? While we were in that village, we learned that there was a contingent of Taliban operators to the north of us, about a kilometer to our northeast, and we made the election to move to contact. We were going to try to, mount an attack on them before they could mount an attack on us. The terrain in this particular area was a very fertile valley at the bottom of a mountain, and in those valleys they grow grapes. And grapes are grown in these big 4-foot ditches over and over and over again. The vines are just draped over these fields. And they're very hard to transverse. You're going up 4 feet, down 4 feet, up 4 feet, down 4 feet. And the common sense person might look and say, well, why don't you just go around the fields? But an explosive specialist like myself in the tactical environment of Afghanistan knows that the path of least resistance is almost always booby-trapped. So we felt if I was a bad guy and I was going to put a bomb with the hopes of bombing coalition forces, I would put it on the easy path around these fields. So it was my job then to take my metal detector and lead our assault force through this really difficult terrain. In between one of these farm fields, on our way to the north, I was actually not leading our patrol. My partner Adam was. So I was halfway back in the middle of this 4-foot trough, and I saw the worst thing you can see at 7:30 in the morning in Afghanistan. A big blast plume went up into the air. Big mushroom cloud, gray, dust and debris, and I thought the worst. I thought my buddy Adam had stepped on an improvised explosive device, and now he is up there and he needs my help. But in those situations, we're trained not to rush to aid, counter to what you might think, because where there's one bomb, there's probably many. And the chosen tactic of the Taliban was to needle us into these areas that had multiple IEDs so that they could obviously impede our forces' movement, but then also attack us in the process so that we're trapped in a situation where we need to evacuate casualties, but we can't tactically engage them because we're trying to evacuate our casualties. So we're trained to just listen to the radio, make an assessment of what's going on, don't get emotional about what's going on, and then make a clear and decisive plan of action. Nothing came over the radio, so I knew whatever's up there, they're going to need my help because of the IED threat. I'm going to need to clear for the medic. I looked at my ground force commander, who was a SEAL lieutenant to my left, and I said, I've got to go to the front. He said, Roger that. He said, there's a field to my left. If we need to bring in a helicopter to evacuate casualties, that's where we're going to do it. I said, Roger that. I ran up about 30 meters to where there was a crumbled out portion of a wall. Immediately over the wall was a 4-foot irrigation ditch. And I was instantly elated when I stepped over to this ditch, looked left. I saw my buddy Adam and 3 SEALs who had made it across this ravine just fine. The pattern of movement for us was going to be off to my left. And I saw both of them, or all 4 of them, looking back at me kind of like with this, like, what the hell happened? And I looked back at them like, what the hell happened? I don't know what happened either. Then I figured out what was going on because I looked to my right and I saw about 1.5 meter wide blast hole in the ground. And 2 really badly injured commandos. This guy in front of me was missing 2 legs, and the guy over there was face down. What had happened was Adam had come up to this ravine, and he had seen that there's it's 4 feet across. There's a crumbled out, what used to be a footpath to his right, and then to his left was obviously the difficult way across, was to go shimmy across this area and then jump across. So Adam cleared it, walked across, jumped across. 3 SEALs followed him and did just fine. The first Afghan to come up to this choke point looked to the right and saw that there was a crumbled out footpath and said, well, it's way easier for me to go this way than to go that way. So he made the election to step right on this footpath. Well, sure enough, there was a 40-pound IED buried in that footpath. So it immediately flung him forward about 15 feet and took off the legs of the guy standing behind him. So now we had 2 Afghan casualties we were contending with. Both of them were unconscious. Utilizing the help of someone behind me, we were able to pick up that first casualty, and we really struggled to move him back about 100 feet, which is where we were going to bring that helicopter down. Time is of the essence, and now we know this Taliban force about 1 kilometer to our north now knows exactly where we are, and they're more than likely mounting a counterattack. We can't be here for much longer. So from the back of the patrol, I grabbed a foldable litter. It's basically a gurney. It's 2 sticks and canvas so that we can pick up a casualty easier. I was running up to the front when I stepped on a secondary IED that was about 1 meter away from the first blast hole. Thankfully, I was alone when I did it. Nobody else was around me. I remember everything right up to the blast. I remember experiencing the blast. What was weird to me was after seeing as many casualties as I had seen in Afghanistan through 27 combat operations, it wasn't painful. It was like a click in my ear, and all of a sudden I was in the fetal position. I remember looking down at my hands and looking down at my feet. I knew that I had been blown up, but I could see my hands and I could see my feet. just out of the vision that that remained out of my left eye. I didn't see any blood. I didn't see any damage. And I thought that meant that I must have died. So I laid there, and I also had this feeling that like time had stopped for me, right? Someone had hit the pause button. And now I'm just laying in this field of Afghanistan, kind of thinking over my life. In that moment, I remembered all these memories going all the way back to when I was 2 years old with my grandpa, going to the beach with my dad, learning how to swim, getting into competitive swimming, going to the Naval Academy and throwing my cap in the air, and going on my first deployment, my second deployment, and now being in Afghanistan with this brotherhood, this really cool brotherhood of special operations. And I remember kind of making this kind of decision, like if you weigh all the stupid shit and the good shit I've done on a balance, I've done a good enough job that I think I'm going somewhere good, right? I can say at 27 years old, I'm proud of the life that I've lived, and I'm willing to pass on now. Not only am I willing, I'm excited about finding about what the secrets of the universe are. Like, do you go on living after you die, or is there just a flash of light and then it's all gone? But for that moment, I thought that I was waiting for what happens next. I also had this prevailing feeling that my hero, my grandpa, was going to be the one to come kind of escort me through this difficult process of passing on to, going wherever you go after you die. So I remember laying there. I remember looking at my watch thinking like, man, Grandpa, hurry up. Like, it takes a long time to die, right? Well, immediately after I kind of went through all that reconciliation process, I had this really bad ringing in my ear. My eardrum had ruptured in 2 places. I had tinnitus. Your eardrum tightens up and you perceive this really awful ringing. It's like, I kept thinking like, am I going to have to listen to this forever now? Because this is pretty awful. But I recognized that tinnitus was coming from real life. I hadn't died. I was still alive. And through the tinnitus, I could hear my buddies Adam and the medic Kyle calling to me. There had been a big cloud of dust and debris that had been kicked up, and they couldn't find me. They knew that I had stepped on an IED, but they couldn't find me. So I started yelling to them. They cleared to me. Adam pulled me into the blast hole, and he and the medic started cutting my gear off so that they could do an assessment. A moment ago when I had reconciled my own death, I had been like excited, elated, really can't wait to pass on and figure out what happens after you die. But now that I was alive, I started to panic. Like, what happened to me? I could feel bad damage on my face. I think at some point my vision went. I couldn't see anything. I thought, well, I had suffered a blast, and I must have taken it with my face. Do I have a traumatic brain injury? Is my spinal cord working? Like, is my heart working the right way? Do I have some sort of weird dynamic where I am dying, I just don't perceive it? You know what I mean? And so all this uncertainty of my condition started to really freak me out. But I remember I asked Adam, I was like, hey, Adam, how is it? How bad is it? He said, well, your face is pretty fucked up, but the rest of you looks all right. You think you can walk? And I thought, well, let's give it a try. So Adam and Kyle, the medic, picked me up and did the little, this kind of walk back to where the helicopter came down. The helicopter landed, I boarded, and they took me to a hospital in Kandahar. When I got pulled off the hospital in Kandahar, the most painful experience I've ever had in my life, I had a leather glove on, my shooting glove, and I had broken my metacarpal on the outside of my hand, and they started taking those arrowhead shears and started cutting my glove off. And I remember yelling about how painful that was, and then I don't remember anything else for 60 hours. They gave me a little sleepy shot. I went to sleep. I didn't wake up for, again, 60 hours. In that 60 hours, I spent 12 in surgery in Kandahar with a team of surgeons and surgeon helpers putting my face back together like Humpty Dumpty. Once I was medically stable, they flew me to Longstool Air Force Base. Something happened in the air, and they had to put me back in surgery for another 8 hours. They were expediting my way back to the country of the U.S. because they felt as though I had obviously sustained some pretty bad damage to my face. They didn't know if my vision was salvageable at the time. So they were expediting me back to get me into Walter Reed, a very static, awesome healthcare facility where they could see if they could save my vision or not. Once I was stable in Longstool, I flew to Walter Reed, where my sister, my mom, my brother met me, and we began that rehab process. And for about 6 days, I didn't really understand what was going on. If you track the news, the stuff that killed Michael Jackson, Dilaudid and propofol, that little combo, Dilaudid as a painkiller, propofol as a sleep aid, I was on that combo. And so it manifested in my mind as this really strange reality. Like, everything to me was like Willy Wonka's Playland, with Johnny Depp as Willy Wonka, and the Oompa Loompas and stuff, and I was hearing inputs from real life. I'm hearing nurses and surgeons, I'm hearing my mom and my sister, and I'm hearing all these things from real life, but it's really confusing to my brain because the way I see it in my imagination is like Willy Wonka's Playland. And I would say stuff to my mom and my family, like real weird stuff, like, I really appreciate them bringing this bunny into my hotel room or my hospital room, but do you think this is okay? They're like, what do you mean the bunny? Like, the bunny at the end of my bed. And they're like, there's no bunny at the end of your bed. So, that kind of stuff was really difficult for me to kind of reconcile what's going on. But I remember at the end of 6 days, the drugs had kind of waned to a point where reality started to set in, and I remember a very sobering conversation that we had with 4 different surgeons who were in the room. 2 were going to perform an operation to my left eye, 2 were going to perform an operation on my right eye. And they went on and on and on about all the different, Dr. Tom talked about the 9,000 pages of eye stuff. Well, I got probably 4,000 of those pages in a 45-minute lecture with these doctors understanding very little of it. But at the end of it, I asked those 4 surgeons, sirs, what does this mean for my vision? Am I going to be able to ever see again? And they said, Lieutenant Snyder, in our estimation, you have a 1% chance of being able to perceive light and dark with your right eye. We're going to remove your left eye so you'll see nothing on your left side. I realized that's doctor speak, that's bedside manner for you are blind and you will be blind for the rest of your life. So this was quite a hit for me at this particular moment of time. At this point I had been in the EOD community for 7 years. We actually deployed to Afghanistan with a SEAL who only had 1 leg. And I had seen kind of the ramifications of war. I knew what a missing limb looked like. I knew what spinal cord injuries looked like. I knew what traumatic brain injury looked like. I had seen and accepted all of those realities. I could live without 1 hand, or I could live without 1 leg. I could live without 2 legs. I could live in a wheelchair. I didn't know what blindness looked like. I had never met a blind person. What do blind people do? Would I be able to continue serving, or can I get a job? Will people hire blind people? What is disability? I don't want to be disabled. I'm not disabled. I'm fine. But does blindness make me disabled? All these different questions started to hit me all at once, and I didn't understand necessarily how to accept blindness. But I'll tell you, there's 2 options when you're put in a spot like that, and we'll get into our all individual bouts of challenge, and I think adversity is on a scale, right? There's things like, what do I order for lunch? That's on the adversity scale, right? That's difficult, right? We have to figure out, do I really want proteins or carbohydrates or whatever? Should I order an extra thing of bacon, or is that bad? Is that a bad idea? That's adversity, right? That's on the low end of the spectrum. On the high end of the spectrum is, you just got blown up and now you're blind, and now you have to figure that out. I truly believe that it's the same things that get you through both of those difficult situations. And in those situations, there's 2 options. When I was faced with blindness, I could go down this path where I could start thinking of all the things that I'll never be able to do. I grew up in Florida, and I love the beach. I will never be able to see the waves crashing against the sandy beach again. I'll never be able to see the sunset. If I'm out here on the West Coast, I'll never be able to figure out if there's a green flash or not. I'll never be able to go to the Rocky Mountains and see, the beautiful Pikes Peak. My sister, who's here today, she's going to grow up one day. She's already grown up, but she's going to get older, and she's going to meet the man of her dreams, and she's going to walk down the aisle in a beautiful white wedding dress. And I'll be there, but I won't be able to see it. And these are the thoughts that hit me in that particular moment, but I realized that's a stupid path to go down, right? Because it doesn't change anything. I can list all day long the things I'll never be able to do, but if I enact that effort in a different way and start to list the things I still can do, that list is infinitely longer. And moreover, in 2009, I lost my best friend, Tyler Trahan, to an IED in Iraq. And even since then, in the last 4 weeks, I've lost 2 additional friends, one in Mosul, Iraq, and one in Syria. Actually, my buddy Scott was killed on Thanksgiving Day while serving in Syria. He's 42 years old, has a wife and 2 kids. Scott came back to the U.S. the other day, flew into Dover Air Force Base in a big wooden box with a flag draped over it. He'll never be able to play catch with his kids, never be able to hug and kiss his wife ever again. He'll never be able to celebrate Thanksgiving with his family, which was what everyone else was doing while he was deployed to Syria, fighting so that we can enjoy the liberties that we have. When I sat in that hospital room, learning that I had been blinded, I thought of my buddy Tyler, and I thought of all the things that he won't ever have the opportunity to do again. And I thought, how selfish would it be of me to put myself in the box of a victim when I came back just fine? I have 4 limbs that work, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a heart that works, a brain that works, a family who loves me, and an infinite opportunity to enjoy the life ahead of me. So what if I can't see? I'll get past that. That's a condition. That's a characteristic of me. It's no different than the fact that I'm 5'9" and 150 pounds and, oh yeah, my eyes don't work. I owe it to Tyler and the rest of everyone else who died abroad to offer me the liberty and offer me the opportunity to enjoy my life as much as possible. It would be a disservice or a dishonor to their sacrifice if I didn't make every effort to enjoy that as much as possible. So with the help of my family and the amazing staff at Walter Reed, we were able to make a decision that said, blindness is not going to be a thing that defines me. It's not going to be a thing that confines me. It's going to be just a characteristic that I have to learn to deal with, and I will deal with that. I will figure it out, and I will move forward. So we made that decision on that day, 6 days in, and about 2.5 weeks later, I was discharged from Walter Reed. I was moved to a VA facility in Tampa, and we began that kind of long road back to recovery. And I give this motivational speech a lot, and I wish there was kind of like this now. That's the turn of the story, right? And there's that Rudy moment where we all just high five, and now we start working our way through blind rehab like, we got this, right? It wasn't necessarily like that. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges that you encounter living your life with no vision. And one of the most difficult moments for me, when you're in Walter Reed and you're dreaming of Willy Wonka's Playland and high off your mind out and dilaudid, there's a lot of people there in intensive care, your mom, your sister, the surgeons, the PAs and the facility and the Wounded Warrior Project, and the American Red Cross and the so-and-so this and that, so-and-so that. There's a infinite number of resources while you're an inpatient at Walter Reed. But eventually that fades, and eventually you wake up in a hospital room alone. And the first day that happened to me, it was really difficult for me because when I dream that I can still see. And in my dreams, I'm walking around the beaches that I miss, or I'm in the mountains and I'm seeing my family. I see my mother's face and I see my sister's face. And moreover, in my dreams, I recognize the fact that I'm blind, but I look down at my cane and I see my hand and I see the white cane and I see everything in perfect detail. And I think, why is this something that I struggle with every day? Blindness is... In my dreams, blindness is easy. I can see just fine. And then I wake up, and it's all dark again. And that first time that happened and I was alone, and I didn't have anyone to talk to, it was really difficult for me because I thought, am I going to have to wake up like this and be reminded that I'm blind every day for the rest of my life? So I pulled out my new talking phone, and I dialed up my mom, the only number I knew off the top of my head, and I called my mom, and I said, Mom, I'm having a real bad day. She said, why? I said, well, Mom, when I dream, I see, and then I wake up and I'm blind again, and I don't know if I can face a reality where I wake up every day to be reminded that I'm blind. So my mom really just shot back with mom wisdom and said, well, Brad, you're looking at it all wrong. And I said, how's that, Mom? She said, well, instead of dreading every morning where you wake up and you find out you're blind again, you got to learn to look forward to the end of every day where you get your vision back, if just for a little while. And it was a really impactful note of advice for me to really show me how we're always able to reframe our perspective. There's always a way to look for the good in every situation. And moreover, I think, we all see the world we want to see. If you look for the good in every person, if you look for the good in every situation, look for the good in every circumstance, I truly believe that is what you will see. If you build a habit on seeing the bad in every situation, seeing the bad in every person, that's truly what you'll see. So I learned in that moment with the help of my mom that I had to make a conscious decision to look for the good in every situation and build a habit on that and look for the good in every person as well. Around that same time, I was hit head on with this sentiment. I'm in the hospital and I'm working through all these different things, the rehab, and I have the stitches on my face and my hand's broken, and I'm working through all that sort of stuff. But meanwhile, during the course of the day, people are visiting me from all walks of my own life. People I knew from Florida, people I swam with, people I went to the academy with, people I served with, and they're all either writing me on Facebook or they're coming to the hospital to visit me. And everyone kept saying these things like, whoa, we're so sad for you. We're so bummed out. I cried when I heard the news. I've cried a lot now. I was so sad and I'm just so devastated, and we're so sorry for you. We're so sorry for you. We're so sorry for you. I hated that sentiment. I appreciated that I had all this love and support. It's so great to be able to have that many people come out and give me that love and say, we care for you. And I appreciated that aspect of it, but I didn't like that everyone felt sorry for me. I didn't like that everyone was sad and everyone was disappointed. I'm used to being this person who's the most capable person in the room. I used to be able to do some really crazy things, from free fall to shooting to demolitions training to literally going hands-on on an explosive device and taking it apart just like you see in the movies. Like, I was trained to do all that stuff. I'm used to being the most capable, most uplifting, most positive person in the room. I didn't like that my impact on all of these people was a negative one. People had opened the newspaper and saw that a guy had got blown up, a guy they know, and they see a picture of me all messed up, I didn't like that my mom was upset. I didn't like that my family was upset. I needed a way to turn that narrative around and say, I don't view myself as a victim, and neither should you. But those words are only so good as the actions that follow. I could tell people that I was fine all day long, but nobody wanted to believe me until they saw me make that commitment or saw me act as though it wasn't going to affect me. Around that same time, I was at a barbecue with my old swim coach, and all these people were doing that same thing, hugging me and crying and sorry for you, sorry for this, sorry for that. My old swim coach is not that kind of person. He came right over to me. He said, Brad, it's great to see you. It's great to see you, coach. And he said, so you're going to be at practice tomorrow? And I said, sure thing, coach. And so that next day, I went down to my mom drove me to the pool, just like she had from the ages of 11 to 17, or whenever I got a driver's license or whatever. She drove me down to the pool. My coach gave me a suit, a big mask to go over my damaged eyes, and I hopped in the pool and started swimming back and forth. And for me, what I found was this nice respite from struggling at all the things I used to struggle at blind. Swimming is not my injury is not a physical injury, right? I just can't see where I'm going. Well, in a pool, there's a wall on either side and a lane line on either side, so I'm literally swimming in a box. I don't need adaptive equipment. I don't need a guide. I don't need a guide dog. I don't need a cane. I don't need a talking phone. I don't need a talking computer. I don't need anything but my hands and my legs. And I swam back and forth, and I found this nice, a break from all the stuff I was struggling at. From putting toothpaste on a toothbrush to finding food on my plate to finding the right colored shirt. I didn't need any of that stuff. I wasn't struggling at it. I could swim back and forth just fine. And not only could I swim back and forth, I could swim back and forth pretty well. I had spent 20 years gaining expertise in swimming. It was something I was good at. And not only did I feel like I was good at something, my family was watching me. And they were watching me and seeing me as the person I was before. They didn't see me as poor, wounded vet, blind guy, Brad, working his way through the hallway in a cane. They saw me swimming back and forth. And it was awesome. So it was a really great node for myself and my family to see me the way that I had been before. And then, oh, by the way, someone was on that pool deck that day and ran over to me and started suggesting that I try the Paralympics. And I thought, when that person introduced it, I was like, so you mean like the Special Olympics? So I was like, I'm fine. Like, I don't need the Special Olympics, that's all right. They're like, no, Paralympics, it's different. It's like the Olympics. It's in the same venues every year. They have swimming in the Paralympics. You might be a really great para-athlete. They have a blind-specific category, and you could swim against all the other blind people in the world, and based on what we're seeing here, you might be really good. I thought, well, we'll give it a try, I guess. But I went into blind rehab, which blind rehab's like Hogwarts for blind people. They give you that long stick, and they teach you how to wave it back and forth, and like talking phones and all this kind of goofy stuff. So anyway, I'm in blind rehab, and I think that the path forward for me involves I got to go be like Dr. Tom and get an education. I have to go get an MBA. I have to figure out how to get on Shark Tank and get $1 million to sell people soap or something along those lines. When people came to me and said that you should pursue adaptive athletics, I was like, well, that's a nice, fun, extracurricular activity, but I really need to get my career on track. So I was kind of resistant to it at the beginning. But then someone's wisdom pervaded and was like, look, you were lucky. You were injured in an Olympic, Paralympic year. If you pass on this opportunity now, you may never have this opportunity again. All you have to do is give it a try. So I said, all right, roger that. I'll give it a try. I flew to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. I filled out all this paperwork. There was a doctor who shined a flashlight at my prosthetic eyes and was like, yep, this guy is blind. And then I swam a race at the Olympic Training Center. It was a 50-meter freestyle, which is just one length of the pool. And in one length of the pool, I swam a time that was fast enough to earn me a spot on the national team, the Paralympic national team. Additionally, it was the 5th fastest time for a blind athlete that year. And I got out of the pool, and everyone was like, wow, that was dope, man. Like, this is great. You're on the 5th fastest time in the blind people of this year, whatever. And I was like, nah, man, you're looking at the wrong list, right? Like, I've never been the top 5 of anything. I've been a decent swimmer my whole life, and swam Division I athletics, and that was pretty legit. But the top 5 in the world, I don't think so. You're looking at left-handed people from Maine, right? Like, and I'm not even from Maine. I shouldn't be on that list. They're like, no, number 5 in the world. So I started taking that endeavor pretty seriously. I actually moved to Baltimore. I found the only coach in the United States who has any experience coaching blind people in the Paralympics, a guy named Brian Loeffler at Loyola University in Maryland. I started training with him, and in a couple months, we were able to shave that number 5 ranking to number 1. I went to the Paralympic trials meet in Bismarck, North Dakota, of all places. I swam a couple different events, the 50, the 100, the 400, and actually in the 400-meter freestyle, I earned the number 1 seed in the world by a significant margin. And I earned a spot on the team to go to London to represent the Team USA and go to the Paralympics. This is a pretty cool dream of mine that's coming to fruition. When I was 11 years old, I really wanted to be an Olympian, and that didn't come to fruition. And now it's come true in this really strange way. I'm now a Paralympian, right? What does that mean? That's pretty cool. So I flew to Baltimore, and I'm still training. We're getting ready for the games, and my coach came out of his office one day, and he had this list in his hand, and he said, "Brad, they just published the order of events for the Paralympic Games in London 2012. Would you like to go through it, and we'll kind of come up with our plan of action?" I said, "Yeah, coach, that sounds like a great idea." So he goes on this. He says, first day is September 4th. You're going to have the opportunity to swim, not your best event, but a good opportunity to get your feet wet, pun intended, the 100-meter freestyle. And on day 2, you're going to swim the 100-meter breaststroke, which is your worst event, but I think we should still do it because there's this weird kind of protocol to international meets. You got to go to the ready room and that's other stuff. And it'll be a good opportunity for you to get used to that. I had never done an international competition in swimming before, so my first real international competition is going to be the Paralympics. So I got to get used to that. Then he got quiet for a second. He said, on the 7th of September, 2012, you're going to swim the 400-meter freestyle. Both of us got goosebumps on our arm because 7th of September 2011 is the day that I lost my vision in Afghanistan. So exactly a year later, I'd have the opportunity to don a new uniform, the uniform of Team USA. I have the opportunity to go to London and compete for my country in an event that I was favored to win by 20 seconds. That's a pretty cool sports story, right? This Navy sailor gets blown up, he wins a gold medal on the year anniversary of the day he loses his vision. That's pretty awesome. So we started training, but then as you might imagine, leading up to the Paralympics, there was all this media attention, all sorts of interviews and stuff like that. Well, it's the Paralympics, so there was a guy in Philly who wrote an article. And I remember that guy, he was talking to me on the phone, and he's like, "So, Lieutenant Snyder, are you nervous to compete in the Paralympics for the first time?" And unfortunately, I said the first thing that popped in my mind. I said, "No." It's I used to defuse bombs in Afghanistan, right? How hard could the Paralympics be? And he laughed, and that went into that article, and it went out on Facebook and the Twitter and whatever. And I remember reading those remarks afterward and thought, that was a real dick thing to say. And I need to revise my media strategy, right? I remember really regretting those remarks because when I went to London for the first time and started walking around the Paralympic Village and listening to all these athletes from different countries speaking different languages about different events, and then I walked into a cafeteria that was the size of 3 football fields, surrounded by food from every corner of the world. You can get pad thai, you can get McDonald's, you can get whatever you want. And then I walked to a swimming arena that was surrounded by 18,000 seats. 18,000. I thought back across my entire swimming career, I thought, what's the biggest crowd I've ever swam in front of? From age group summer league swim meets when I was 11 years old, all the way up to Division I championships with Navy and Army and the Ivy Leagues and all that kind of stuff. What's the biggest crowd? A couple hundred people, right? 200-300 people tops. And of that crowd, it's everybody's mom. And everybody's mom's in the stands, looking at Pinterest about brownies and stuff. And they're like, "Oh, look at that, it's cute, right?" They don't really care about what's going on in the pool. They're just kind of there because they love you. They love swimming, but they love swimming, not that really. When I went to London, it was 18,000 screaming European hooligan fans who are stoked about everything, right? You walk out on the pool deck and you take a little towel off your shoulder and put it on a chair, and they're like, "Whoa, towel on the chair, he's ready to go," super excited. And I thought, oh, shit, this. I started to get a little nervous, right? So the way that these events work at the Paralympics, you have to show up 45 minutes in advance of your swim to get all these checks done, right? Your goggles can only have the brand on it one time, and your hat, your cap has to have the flag, and it has to be a certain size, and your name has to be a certain font, it has to be a certain color, and it can't have any brands on it. And then your suit has to have a QR code that says that this suit has been approved, and you can't have any tattoos of the Olympic rings because that's a big deal. So you have to get inspected before you go out into these races. And then once you pass inspection, you sit in these sets of chairs. There's probably like 6 or 7 sets of 8 chairs. 8 chairs, 8 swimmers, 8 lanes. And as the program for the evening's events, the finals, go on, the announcer will announce each heat, and that heat will walk out on the pool deck, and they'll swim their race, and then so on and so forth. And the first set of chairs is kind of like in this little, almost like a closet. It's really quiet. Nothing going on. And all you can hear is the iPod of the guy next to you. And it's weird because he's from China. He doesn't speak any English. He's rocking out to Hotel California by the Eagles, right? Getting in the zone. And then as you advance in these sets of chairs, you get closer and closer and closer to that crowd, the people who are stomping and yelling and wooing and all this sort of stuff. And oh, by the way, in 2012, dubstep was really cool, so there's like dubstep music. I had never even knew what dubstep was before I'd gone to London. And all of a sudden, this voice announces,
"Please welcome your competitors for the S11 400-meter freestyle."
And then you walk out in front of those 18,000 people. Now, thankfully, I'm a study of the sport, and I do all this, go to these seminars and learn about sports psych. I'm a big advocate of self-talk, right? So I'm in my zone, like just talking to myself, getting those positive affirmations. You're good enough. You're smart enough. Gosh darn it, people like you. So like they're announcing each guy, by lane, and at that point, you're like taking off your little hoodie, and if it's not daunting enough to walk out in front of those 18,000 people, as swimmers, we're basically like in our underpants, right? Stripping down to our underpants in front of 18,000 people. But I'm telling myself, don't worry. The dude from Spain in lane 3, he's like this real dreamy Jack dude. Everyone's looking at him. Don't worry about it. They're not looking at you. So put my stuff in the basket. And in that particular moment, they announce,
Swimming in lane 4 for the United States of America will be Brad Snyder.
I realize at that moment, all of those 18,000 people are looking right at me. But then this really cool thing happened where my coach put my hand on the block. And it's kind of going back to those things that we were doing with Dr. Tom this morning. There's a lot of stuff going on in that particular moment. And if you let your mind start to wonder about the crowd, the expectations, the media, all this other stuff, it takes you away from what you're there to do. Stand on one foot or march or whatever. I was there to swim. All I had to do was focus on my lane, my block, the lane lines on either side, the clear water that stretched out for 50 meters in front of me, the wall on either side. I've been swimming for 20 years. All I have to do is get in and execute. My favorite moment in sports comes right after that. A referee blows the whistle 3 times. The entire arena goes dead quiet. Blows the whistle again. We step up. Take your mark. And I dove off, right? I make this joke that blind swimming, it's a little bit like NASCAR, right? The entire arena just goes, because you realize there are 8 dudes who can't see a thing, who are just trucking down the lane, right? And there's a lane line on the other side, and there's a wall at the other side. And it's inevitable. One of those guys is going to slam right into the lane line, right? And you, like, maybe a component of you is kind of hoping for it because it'll look really cool, but you just don't want it to be the guy you're rooting for. And as me down in the pool, I'm trying, and that's exactly what I'm thinking. Just don't crash, right? And I've kind of figured out my stroke where I'm looking for the lane on either side, so I'm just trying to keep myself in this area as quick as possible. And as a study of the sport, I know every lap I get under my belt, it's significantly less chance that I'm going to bump into that lane line, lose speed, and lose the chance of winning, right? So that's all I'm thinking about the whole race is just don't crash, just don't crash, just don't crash. 1 lap down, okay, I'm good. Got off that wall, all right. 2 laps down, I'm good. 3, I got a little close on this side. Fatigue's starting to set in, but I got it back. I'm in the middle of the pool. I'm doing well. 4 is done. I'm halfway done, all right. Now coming into my 5th lap. It's going really well. 6, picking it up, throwing everything I have into that last 100. 7's done. 8's done. I'm on my last lap, and I come into the wall and finish. This funny thing happens in blind sports that doesn't happen in any other sport that I've seen, right? We all have this like really awesome image, the GOAT, Michael Phelps. He comes into the wall, and he looks up at a Jumbotron. It's got his face like in big flash bulbs. Michael Phelps wins for the 433rd time, and Rowdy Gaines is going nuts. And then Michael Phelps looks up at that Jumbotron, and he's like, yeah, I did it again, right? I knew it, but you guys doubted me, but I did it again. And he 2 arms in the air, and he looks up at Team USA. He's like, fist pump, Team USA, right? He looks up at his mom, and he's like, put the baby down, I'm over here. You look at Pinterest later, like, won again. Well, it doesn't happen in blind sports because we can't see the Jumbotron. So we finished the race, and you sit there. Now, for me, I think it's like the race of my life, right? This great, super cool story, and I've never been in an international competition before, and I swam all 8 lengths just the best I possibly could. My adrenaline is through the roof, and my hands tingling. I just want to really throw that fist pump in the air. What kind of idiot am I going to look like if I start fist pumping, and actually it turns out the guy in lane 8 had the race of his life, and he beat me, and so I'm down there whooping or whatever, and they're like, that idiot doesn't know what's going on. I'm like, it's the most excited second place finish we've ever seen. So every blind guy just finishes, sits there. I felt the guy like next to me, he comes into the wall and finishes, so at least I beat him, right? And my inclination is like, I want to lean over and be like, so dude, what happened? You see? He's blind too, he has no idea, so he just sits there and stares at the wall. But then this really cool thing happens where the referee blows those 3 blasts of the whistle one more time. My coach, who was standing right there, had the opportunity now to lean over to me, and he said 2 words I'll never forget. He said, "You won." That story came true. I won a gold medal in the Paralympics exactly a year after the day I lost my vision in Afghanistan. It was a really cool moment. So now a lot of cool stuff happens when you win a race like that, right? Like you get out and you wave to the crowd, and they're super jazzed, and they're like, whatever. It doesn't matter if you're an American or not. They're super stoked for you. And you wave over here, and they ask you to do this and that, the other thing, wave or whatever. You go over to the media, and the media from all over the world wants to ask you all kinds of funny questions in languages that you may or may not understand. And then you go take a pee test to make sure you're not doping. And then you go throw on another fancy uniform, Team USA, and you go to the podium. The podium's a really cool moment, right? Because for a moment, this delegate from London comes over and puts a medal around your neck. And they give you a bouquet of flowers, and they do a little kissy kiss thing. And for that moment, it's like, that boy, Brad, you did something great. We're all proud of you. But that's a fleeting moment. Why? Because immediately after they play the anthem, our anthem, and they raise our flag higher than all the other flags in that arena. As I stood at attention listening to that anthem, I realized that those 50 stars and 13 stripes represented something so much bigger than me. I thought back to Kyle and my buddy Adam, who came to me when I was down on the battlefield and dusted me off when I needed to be picked up. They walked me to where a helicopter landed, where that pilot put himself and his flight crew and his aircraft at risk in a hostile area to pick me up and take me to where I could get help. To that surgeon who spent 12 hours, she and her staff, putting my face back together. To the air crew who took me to Longstool, where I spent another 8 hours in surgery. Underway, my mother got a phone call at 5 in the morning saying her son had been blown up. We don't know the extent of his injuries. He probably has a traumatic brain injury. He's unable to communicate with you right now, but you need to fly to Walter Reed Hospital as soon as possible. To my brother and my sister who wrapped their arms around her and got her through that traumatic instance. To all the people who came out of the woodwork to give me their love and support when I was hurt. To my swim coach who gave me that spark to get me back in the water. To my next swim coach who gave me the skills that I needed to succeed in that environment. I did not do any of those things by myself. I was the vehicle through which all of that effort came to fruition. Individuals never accomplish anything truly great. It's when communities leverage their collaborative efforts towards cohesive goals, that's where true magic happens. I was merely the vehicle for that, and that gold medal represents that community's effort. So, moreover, I travel around and I tell that story to a lot of different people, and it's really, I feel very humbled to have the opportunity to share a story which really talks about this idea of resilience. And I've been in environments just like this where afterward people will say, it's really great to see how well you bounced back. You returned to normal. And for a long time, I didn't really like that sentiment either, and I didn't understand why until I read a book by Eric Greitens, who I think is now the governor of Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. But he's a former, or ex-Navy SEAL who wrote a book about, it's actually titled, aptly, Resilience. And in the book, he proposes an alternative understanding or an alternative meaning of the word resilience. The traditional definition of the word resilience is this one of static resilience. You take a rubber band, you stretch it. What happens to the rubber band when you let go? It goes back to its original state. So for a long time, our interpretation of resilience is this idea of remaining this static entity. But people are not static entities. We are on a linear timeline. And every minute that we're alive, every moment that we're alive, every experience that we have, every lesson, every symposium, every instance is an opportunity for us to grow, to develop, to learn new things, to become wiser, become better versions of ourselves than in the previous moment. There is no original state. There is no normal. to confine us by a definition of resilience that says that we're always struggling to return to a normal state, that confines us to what our normal state is. There is no normal state. And if you can learn to let go of that normal state and redefine resilience as making a conscious decision to accept the environment that you are in and make a decision to move forward regardless of those circumstances, that makes you resilient. And that allows you to make the most of every moment so that in any given moment, you are the best version of yourself. If I'm a better person than I was a second ago, I'm on the right path. I think that's only further embodied by this idea, like going back to losing my friends on the battlefield, right? Like, I owe it to them. I owe it to them to make the most of my life because they gave theirs so that I may continue to live. So I make the most of every one of those moments in honor of them. And in doing so, by committing myself to this idea of dynamic resilience, always becoming a better version of myself, that's the way I can honor their memory. Now, I bring that up because not everyone has a friend who died on the battlefield. You know, the sacrifice of those abroad is not as real to all of us as I wish it would be. But I encourage you guys to find what I call an anchor thought. Their sacrifice is what gets me through the tough times. You know, I'm a motivational speaker, I guess, by my living, right? And I give this speech all the time. But that does not mean that day to day, I just breeze through any challenge that I'm faced with, right? I get hangry, I get pissed off, I get, depressed, I get upset about things. And very frequently, I have to use my own cliche advice to get me through these difficult times. My anchor thought is Tyler Trahan. My anchor thought is Scott Dayton. My anchor thought is Jason Finan. Those guys who gave their life for me, that's my anchor thought. But like I said, you guys didn't know those guys, and I don't expect you to. But find your anchor thought. For other people, their anchor thought might be their kids. I want to be the best version of myself today because I see how my son looks at me, and I want to inspire him to be the best version of himself. And how can I teach him that life lesson if I don't live that myself, right? So whatever your anchor thought is, I encourage you guys to introspect. Look across the gamut of your life and find that one thing that you can latch onto, you can anchor yourself to, that will help you become the best version of yourself every day. I think if you guys can do that over a long period of time, that is the way you establish a legacy. And a legacy is what I was trying to hint at with my grandpa. My grandpa's legacy is such that he had an amazing impact on all the people he interacted with through the gamut of his life. And I saw that as a 2-year-old grandson. And it set me on a path that allowed me to achieve what a lot of people define as great things. I graduated from a service academy, I deployed to 2 different war zones, and I am now a Paralympic gold medalist. I would say that I'm proud of that path. I'm proud of that life I've lived. And in many ways, I owe that vector, I owe that path to my grandpa because of his legacy. So I hope that you guys will be able to understand the power of perspective, understand your part in a community, and if you make that commitment to yourself to be the best version of yourself in any given moment, then I believe in doing that so over time, you will establish a legacy that will inspire future generations. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. For the record, I wasn't bowing, I was unclipping the leash, so.
Thank you, guys. Brad, that was awesome. That was awesome. So we're going to get set up here. You can just hang out for just a second. Guys, 5-10 minutes. If you got to go to the bathroom, do what you got to do. And then we're going to sit John and Brad down and keep the momentum going. That was awesome, Brad. Thank you, guys.
I think he's all mic'd up. Hello, hello.
Test, 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 test.